they got the guy that they probably should have gotten all along. Like, to me, I'm a Matt Campbell, I don't want to say fan because we're not really fans of anything here except
Yeah.
for the professional teams that I back. I'm a fan of what the guy's done. I'm a fan of the resume. I am of the assumption that, and maybe I'm wrong, and we'll have plenty of time to find out in the coming months, years if I am. You have the template in place. You have done a lot with a little in terms of resources, right? In terms of revenue, of opportunities, of, hey, you're little brother in the state of Iowa, and you've got to find a way to navigate that. And this staff has done it masterfully. And so I was intrigued by Matt Campbell from the get-go. I was surprised that Penn State didn't pursue him harder earlier than they did. But I think, John, for all of this search is a disaster. It's terrible. Someone needs to step in, take over. It's going to flame out. Oh my God, how did they get here? All the hysteria. And like, I get it because it was trended that way. And
Yeah.
I wrote, God, I don't know the day, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day it was, that I thought that Matt Campbell was the only way they could salvage this search.
We said that on the
And
last
they
episode,
did.
both of us.
That's right. We talked about that. That's
Yeah.
right. How soon I forget.
Yes.
But yeah, I just think this is a smart hire. You look at the regional fit. He's an Ohio guy. Again, like, we'll have to see a lot of moving parts, who comes with him. Like, we can get into all that stuff. But gut reaction, I like the hire. I think fans, don't be tempted to, because I've seen some of this already, don't be tempted to look at the records and say, oh, well, here's the record. Here's James's record. Here's his. It's apples to oranges because Iowa State is so different and it's so difficult to win there and do what the guy has just done there for the past decade.
And before we get too much in his track record, I still want to talk about this process a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I know. You mentioned something, about like sort of watching it all play out and letting it all play out. I'm reminded of a phrase that our friend Nate Boward over Blue White Illustrated likes to use on his message board. He says you run the race, right? Like that's what Penn State had to do, right? Like there were diversions along the way. Things didn't go great at times. You got to run the race. You got to get to the finish line. And I think one of the reasons, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think one of the reasons and I believe you didn't publish anything when it started to come out around like whatever that was, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, is because that point in the search, the 99% confidence is the confidence level that Penn State had with Satake, right? Like that is where they were at. Things were agreed to then too, right? Like, in fact, I think you could argue that it was further along and it was just a matter of finishing the season.
And so like thought out. Yes.
And now there was more time and everything for him to reconsider and all that stuff. And that has to be considered, but that's why you wait, right? Like that's why you wait until it is done and it is agreed to and everything is like the team meeting's been scheduled and all of that stuff to inform players on both sides. And so I think that's important in this process to kind of why you saw us not say anything at the time. And I think Audrey, you tweeted something about like, we've been here before, right? Like we saw this play out, and that's, I think that's a good way to put what this afternoon was.
For sure. With the Matt Campbell stuff Friday afternoon, it's like, yes, it's trending that direction, but a little like journalism nerd inside baseball here, like it's got to get done. And that's the apprehension that Penn State fans understandably so had of like, okay, and that's why I tweeted that out of like, guys, we've been here before just on Tuesday. Like I can't stress enough just how close Penn State thought that they had a deal done before. Like they thought that it was getting done. And it didn't. And so you got to pivot. You got to figure it out. And I just, again, like I said before, I like Matt Campbell. I like the idea of it. I like the fit. Now, by keeping Terry Smith, which is what I'm reporting, that I think is going to help you try and keep these guys that, boy, we've had some audio leaks over the past 20
we'll
hours.
Get to that.
We've had tweets. We've had a lot of angst. Like
we've had people try and derail the process from behind the scenes because they had ulterior motives. And I think some of those things are tied together even. Are we surprised that it's 8 years? Not really. Campbell had leverage. Right? Like this was, listen, from the outside, it looked like a pretty dire situation. I don't know that it was dire, but it certainly wasn't great. And so he was able to get some additional stuff, right? Like he was able to get those assurances that, as Matt Fortuna of Inside Zone, that you can subscribe to on Substack as well, reported initially, I believe, you can kind of fight for those things to give yourself your best chance possible when you have leverage, and he had it.
Yeah, he had it. And here's what else I want to mention about, again, my Matt Campbell crash course. This is not a guy, and the past 10 years at Iowa State speak to this. This is not a leveraging guy. This is not a, hey, I'm a climber, right? Which, again, that was James Franklin. That was what was attached to him when he got here. And I've told this story before. When James got here, my thought was like, all right, this guy's going to be here maybe 3-4 years, build this program, move on to some other job, right? Because that had been his background. That is not Matt Campbell. This is a guy who's had opportunities to climb, who's had opportunities to leverage. And now it's about, again, it's the assistant staff pool. It's about, making this into what you want it to be. And that's where we know Penn State's going to spend. And John, the last time Penn State went in, pulled away a head coach at Iowa State.
What happened there?
Jamie Pollard there. Worked out pretty darn good because, of course, as listeners know, because it was happening tonight, wrestling, that was Cale Sanderson. And boy, I had a really fun time a few years ago pulling back the curtains on that search. And Penn State flew into Des Moines, actually, that time because they were a little bit worried about it getting out. So I will say,
flew straight into Ames this time.
Straight in. Do we know anything about their runway there? How, is it longer?
No,
probably.
I'm getting ahead of this now.
Sorry, I'll stop. No. I was told I do not think this is a head coach who's going to make any complaints about the local runway. Again, I could be wrong.
I don't think he'll complain about a lot, honestly. I think that is not, like you said, that's kind of not his style. A couple important things. One, I will show this on the screen, and then I will say something else first, and then you can answer this. No, it's an important question. Someone wants to know what you're drinking, Audrey. Real quick, though, being reported by Pete Nakos of On3 that Campbell is working to bring defensive coordinator John Heacock with him to Happy Valley. We'll talk about that here in a second. Audrey, what are you drinking?
So to be fully transparent, I just reached in my fridge and was like, okay, what should I look at? What do I want to have tonight? And it is a Harpoon Winter Warmer Holiday Ale with cinnamon and nutmeg. That's what they tell me. So, hey, John, maybe they want to be a sponsor.
There we go. Yeah, and listen, no free plugs, so go ahead.
Yeah,
cough it up eventually. So there's a question in the chat that someone nailed something at about 8:57 about what took so long on Matt Campbell, and they asked a very specific thing, and I'm not going to answer that question. But yeah,
what did they ask?
Just about potentially the reasoning on why it took so long, and we'll do some digging on that.
I got you. Why wasn't he among the first candidates? Because again, John, there was a reporter on here, and again, I don't remember if you had this or not, but there was a reporter who had like 5 names of candidates on her Substack inside the Lions, where she said initially, hey, if I was Penn State and I was making this hire, these are the 5 candidates I'd be picking from. And you know who I had among those names in there? Matt Campbell.
Yep,
and as I worked through my process and I narrowed it down to 3, I also had Matt Campbell on there. As I sat at a lovely brewery in Coralville, Iowa, the night before the Penn State-Iowa game, John, that's when I knew. I looked at it and I turned my head and I saw this awesome Cyclones logo, and I was going to buy a beer to support their collective, but they didn't have any. So again, this speaks to just how rough things perhaps are going at Iowa State, that they didn't have any beers available for me to try and test out their beer. Just to be like, all right, cool. But the logo was awesome. So at that moment, John, I said, you know what? It'd be pretty cool if they hired Matt Campbell because it makes sense. Here we are almost 2 months later.
I do think there were some circumstances that occurred that led to maybe a disconnect in the impression of how much interest there was from Campbell's end early on. We'll try to continue to do more digging, and I don't feel comfortable saying
we'll have an
more than that right now. Yeah,
probably some point next week. We'll get the intro presser. We'll get our questions in. I remember when James Franklin and his staff got here, and so many of those guys, again, these were ultimately a staff of, at that time, younger guys coming up through the profession. They were grinding around the clock to get here. And I remember so many of those guys saying, man, it is so different when you walk into a high school and you've got the Penn State logo on your chest, right? And like you have the chance to say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. That I think we're going to see a similar response with these Iowa State folks and whoever kind of migrates here with Matt Campbell's staff. It is different. It's a different brand, right? It's a different level. It's a different opportunity to perhaps get into conversations with people that you weren't having before because of the level of your program. So to me, again, I view this as a look at the potential, look at the upside of bringing in Matt Campbell and this staff. That's where I'm at on it. Again, I could be wrong. We'll find out. And if I am, I'm sure many of you will remind me, and that's okay. But I think that's where, like, you look at, they just signed their 2026 class, right? They're about 50th nationally, which was like a historic class for them. That was a really good haul. So I was fielding a question earlier today in my subscriber chat, which has also been super fun. We have been chatting through it this week over on my Substack Inside the Lions, and someone had mentioned that with recruiting, and they said, well, okay, it's a top 50 class. Like, James was consistently doing better. And my rebuttal to that is, yes, this is a different beast now and a different opportunity that Matt Campbell will have. And so we're going to get to see, right? Like, how does that recruiting template change? How does the ability to have access financially to more resources, how does that part change? Because these guys, like, their bread and butter had to be at Iowa State identifying and developing talent, because that's what you have to do at a program at that level. And to their credit, they were able to keep so many of these guys. Like, they weren't living in the portal. And you look at their roster, they have guys that could have left and gotten bigger paydays elsewhere. And they didn't, and they stayed with Matt Campbell in part because of that culture, right? And so I think that's an important piece, because I think you're getting a program building type.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
As my AirPod falls out.
Yeah, no, hot start there, or hot continuation there. Question here that I think a lot of people have been asking: does Penn State get Rocco back? We don't know. It's certainly not impossible. I wouldn't be surprised if Campbell brings 20 plus guys with him from Iowa State. My anticipation when it was going to be Satake was that number would have been potentially in the 30s, right? That would have followed him from BYU. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's the case from Iowa State. I will say, Beck is a good quarterback. Will be sought after he goes in the portal. There's also a chance Penn State swings higher, right? Like, I think they're going to be chasing the best quarterbacks available. If that's Beck, then great. If it's not, great, right? I think they're going to pay up for a quarterback this year. I also think it's worth mentioning, unless you have any thoughts there on Beck.
No, we're good. We're good.
Yeah. The
offensive
staff, I'm very curious to see here, because I saw some questions about that.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of them. It is going to be interesting to see, like, Taylor Mauser, I believe is how you pronounce his name. The offensive coordinator / tight ends coach at Iowa State is a little inexperienced. Their offense wasn't great this
34.
year. Yeah, and he's only in his second year as an OC. I wouldn't be surprised if they go for someone sort of more high profile, and he's maybe the tight ends coach at Penn State, or he's even potentially stay at Iowa State. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Not guaranteeing that happens. He could be Penn State's offensive coordinator, but it would make sense to me if he was the tight ends coach at Penn State, continued learning, because Penn State has used that position specifically, tight ends coach, as sort of a feeder spot to the offensive coordinator role, so you can learn under the offensive coordinator. I wouldn't be surprised if that were his role at Penn State, and they bring in someone that has kind of more of a profile, because, as Fortuna reported, they're expected to have $17 million for assistants and staff, and that is more than enough to go get a high-profile offensive coordinator if Campbell so wishes.
Now, you've also got the Jim Knowles, Andy Kotelnicki piece of this too, right? Which that's when you talk about like eating money and resetting and those kinds of things, that's going to be just kind of how this thing plays out, right? Like, I think we're leaning more toward a full reset than anything else. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see, but yeah, I mean, their DC is, I believe he's 65 years old, I believe.
Yeah. And like I said, Nakos was reporting that he's going to make an effort to bring him to Penn State, which I think is interesting. I do like, I don't love his defensive scheme. They run a 3-3-5. I think a 4-2-5 is better. I would be curious, maybe he alters that because it's easier to recruit to a 4-2-5 when you have more talent available. But yeah, I don't love a 3-3-5. They could make it work. I'm not saying they can't, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the other piece too, is like, all right, if your DC wants to come with you, this is someone who has been with him for a long time. So you look at the connecting points there, like these are his guys. We so often talked about James Franklin and his guys and the people who are with him forever. Matt Campbell has those people too. Mauser is one of those guys who's been in
Yep.
his program for a long time, really has worked his way up to that OC role. But as John said, maybe we see it in a different capacity if he comes here with him. We'll see. But yeah, their DC. It's an interesting situation because they certainly would have familiarity with Jim Knowles going back to the Big 12 and when he was at Oklahoma State. So, you'd have that familiarity there. Obviously, Knowles is in, just wrapping up the first year of a 3-year deal here. But yeah, if he wants to bring his guy, he's going to have every opportunity to bring his guy. So we'll see. I mean, these are all the staff movement. Gosh, I mean, this stuff's going to play out here in the next couple weeks. But again, this is the awkwardness of this bowl situation. This is what we hit on last week when I said, you know what, the best scenario for these guys is to not have to deal with a bowl game, because you're going to have guys in the building that know they're not part of this next staff. And what's that like, right? I mean, do you do the job? Do you mail it in? I mean, I get it. Everything you're doing impacts your next job, but it's a tough spot for a lot of people in that building. So I want to be sensitive to that too, because again, these are folks with families and this is their livelihood.
Children are in school right now.
Yes. It is hard and it's difficult. And again, that's there's a lot of people over there in that building that know, hey, come January, we're not going to be here. And we might not know where we're going to be, but we're picking up and we're moving. And that's tough.
Question here that I think is really important for the whole thing. Will they follow the trend of bringing in more of an NFL style front office? To me, that is the whole point of all of this. That is why in the end, the big overarching theme is that James Franklin was fired. They brought in a new head coach who would have an NFL style front office, who would be a more modern college football program with a general manager, with player personnel staff, not necessarily separate from the coaching staff, but that works in tandem, not just takes orders from a head coach, and that has a real voice in the room. I don't know that it's going to be full Ron Rivera at Cal or Andrew Luck at Stanford. I'm not ruling that out, but it is not going to be like James Franklin's relationship with Andy Frank, to be blunt, right? James Franklin told Andy Frank what to do, right? He told him what to do. He was his superior, and I'm not doubting that Campbell will be his GM superior too, but that GM will have a much bigger say than Penn State's previous GM.
Yeah. So the guy at Iowa State that was functioning in that role is a guy by the name of Derek Hoodger. And I was doing some asking around about him within the last 48 hours. This is someone who, you talk about Iowa State ties. He was at Iowa State in 2011 as a student assistant, and he stayed there ever since. So again, I keep mentioning Matt Campbell and his guys, who are these people? This GM certainly, to me, would fit the billing of that, which I would imagine he comes here with him. Again, I could be wrong. We'll see. But how and this came up in the audio leaks as well, how Penn State spent their money and how they did. And we talked about it. I mean, I wrote about it after James Franklin was fired, was, do you want to pay your top players more money? Or Penn State's structure under James Franklin was, hey, we want to give everybody on the roster some money because we want to preserve the locker room dynamic, right? There are different ways of looking at this. That every GM, every staff, that's going to be a push and pull. And how are the top teams doing it? Which is also tough because when we deal with figures and this space in college football, it's so difficult to get actual, true, legitimate answers on how much a team spent on their roster and how that money was divvied up and what the players are making, because guys are told not to talk about it, right? That's a big part of this to preserve the locker room dynamic. Or you could just have an audio leak and tell everybody what your roster's meant. I mean, that works too. But
yeah, that's true.
So yeah, the role of the GM is massively important. I am fascinated to learn more about what they want to do here. Quite frankly, I think that's a question we will get into. Once Matt Campbell is introduced. I'm sure he will be asked about it. I'm sure Pat Kraft will be asked about it, among many other things. But yeah, this is a big position in this era of the sport.
Yeah, someone said, when do we expect the staff movement to happen? I would expect guys to leave for Virginia Tech after the bowl game. Other staff movement could happen sooner. What is the fallout for Kraft? And I think this is important to get into. I don't know if you want to get into this first, Audrey, and then I can piggyback off it. But I think honestly, there's not much.
Yeah, I think it's okay, it was a bumpy ride to get here, but you landed the plane and you got a really good, talented candidate that I think, had we not known publicly, right, what we knew about this search, had we not known that they were so far in the process and that BYU's guy was their top candidate and that they thought they were getting this done and didn't, if this search didn't become so public on Tuesday, I think you could roll out Matt Campbell, who historically, right, this is the other part with Matt Campbell. He's not a guy who's having conversations during the season. Like, he's always shut them down.
Yeah.
Like, I am not entertaining job offers while my team's playing.
I don't know that he always has. He has recently, because I think the USC thing really impacted him in a major way with that.
And that's fair. And I think that's kind of the part of it where you're like, all right, ultimately at the end of the day, you got a really good candidate. And quite frankly, if Matt Campbell comes in here in the next 2 years and they keep this thing rolling and they are able to build off of the successes of the Franklin era, and if it translates to this level, right, and all those things, big ifs, but if that happens, people are going to look back at these past 54 days and kind of just laugh about it, I think, and be like, wow, remember that? Remember the whole crumble the cookie thing? And oh my God, remember when we thought we were getting this coach and we were tracking flights and we were doing all these crazy things that come with coaching searches? At the end of the day, you got a really good candidate. You got a candidate that, had it not become so public and so messy and blown up, I think a lot of people would have been happy with Matt Campbell from the jump.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think the fact that it became public is the actual problem, right? It's not the way that they handled the search. I know people wanted it done immediately. Like, I don't think there's that much of a difference.
Timeline. We are in the same timeline that we thought we would be. Maybe we're a weekish later. Maybe 5
days. But I don't think it's even a week. I can't stress this enough, because I said on the last pod, we obviously have different listeners, different viewers. I want to make sure everyone knows that this is the reason. To be clear, though, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button down below. We greatly appreciate it. They did not fire James Franklin just to get a jump start on the coaching search. They fired James Franklin when they did, so James Franklin would have the most optimal opportunity to be a head coach and help mitigate the buyout as much as they could. That's it. They were never hiring a coach midseason. Like, it just wasn't going to happen.
And you look at it, John, knowing everything we know now, right? You got James Franklin. You got the $9 million.
Penn State officially announced the hire.
Oh, did they? At 9:30 on a Friday night.
9:27, pending board approval.
There we go. Yeah, officially official.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's at the end of the day, you got everything that you needed, right? Like, you got your guy. Your search was what it was, and I think that's certainly Pat Kraft is going to be asked about why there wasn't a search committee, why a search firm wasn't involved, why he wanted to run this thing. And those are all questions that we have to get answers to, because I'm curious about that. But at the end of the day, you got a good candidate. And man, it sure felt like for a while we were going to be firing up this podcast and being like, oh my gosh, like, are we talking about an AD firing? Are we talking about an NFL head coach that we think is a really bad fit? Are we talking about, oh my God, they just pulled out some random candidate? Or, oh, they just reached on like the next tier of coordinators, because the top tier of college coordinators, those guys were gone. Thankfully, we don't have to have those conversations, because I thought we were going to be having those potentially on Wednesday, maybe on Thursday. If Matt Campbell would have gotten cold feet, maybe we would have had some of that. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, the best thing Matt Campbell can do is come in here, show who he is, let this roster see who he is, what he's about, and then let players decide, because January 2nd, that portal window is open in one way or the other, and we're going to get resolution on this roster pretty soon within that next month.